Welcome to the deep dive. I am looking right at you today.
Always glad to be here with you.
Yeah, you, the curious third mind in the room with us. I am genuinely thrilled you decided to join this conversation because we have a massive, totally intricate journey mapped out for you today.
We really do. It is a dense one.
It is. We are going to be setting our sights on a text that has fundamentally shaped the daily lives and the internal mindsets of millions upon millions of people across the globe.
Down to their physical and spiritual routines.
Right. But right out of the gate, I want to give you the hook. The reason why this specific deep dive is so utterly compelling. This text that we are unpacking today, it was not written for elite scholars debating in dusty ancient libraries.
Not at all.
It wasn't crafted for high-level philosophers or academic theologians who just spend their lives arguing over footnotes.
Yeah.
It was explicitly, meticulously designed for the everyday person.
The general public.
Exactly. We are talking about the shopkeeper, the middle school teacher, the exhausted parent, the person who is just trying to make it through their incredibly busy Tuesday while holding on to a tether that connects them to something bigger.
And that is a very different kind of text than we usually look at.
It really is. So today's deep dive is an exploration of a highly influential Islamic text. Our central mission for the next hour or so is to extract the profound foundational concepts that are often hidden right beneath the surface of seemingly simple daily religious practices.
The architecture of a meaning-making machine, essentially.
Yeah, it is exactly what it is.
That is precisely the mission, and I am so glad we are taking the time to do this properly. But I think before we plunge into the mechanics of the text itself, it is absolutely vital that we establish a clear, sturdy framework for our discussion today.
Absolutely.
The source material we are looking at is deeply, inextricably rooted in core Islamic theological viewpoints. Our role here in this deep dive is not to take sides. We are not here to endorse these viewpoints, nor are we here to preach the theology contained within these pages.
Right, we are looking at the structure.
Exactly. We are impartially, analytically unpacking the original source material. We want to lay out the architecture of these ideas clearly so that you, the listener, can fully comprehend the unique perspective, the pedagogical brilliance, and the specific historical context contained within it.
We're acting as guides to the text.
We are observing the structure from the inside out, understanding the why and the how of these practices as defined by the text itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. We need to define exactly what we are looking at. The primary source material is a text called Explanation of Important Lessons for the General Ummah.
Which is a translation of Shar Aduris Amohimali Amat Al-Ummah.
Yes. Now, the original author of the core manual is Imam Abdul Aziz bin Ibn Baz, who was a highly prominent, incredibly influential Islamic scholar who passed away in the Islamic calendar year of 1420 AH.
An absolute giant in his field.
He was. But we aren't just reading his original bare-bones manual. We are looking at it through the lens of a much more expansive explainer, a commentator named Abdul Razzaq bin Abdul Muhsin al-Badr.
His detailed explanation of Ibn Baz's manual was published around 1436 AH.
Which puts it roughly in the year 2015 in the Gregorian calendar. So we have this ancient foundational theological tradition distilled by a 20th century scholar and then expanded upon by a 21st century commentator.
And the historical context of the core text creation is truly fascinating. When you examine the biography of Imam Ibn Baz, you are looking at a scholar of immense stature, a man who produced volumes of complex legal and theological rulings.
Massive encyclopedias of work.
Volumes. Yet what the historical sources note is that he was remarkably intensely dedicated to this specific, incredibly short manual. He literally spent the twilight of his life constantly revising it.
That detail really stood out to me.
The records indicate that he delivered 12 specific lessons on this exact condensed material at the Prophet's Mosque in Medina in the year 1415 AH. But he didn't just deliver the lectures and walk away.
He kept tinkering with it.
He was making final adjustments, tweaking the wording, refining the pedagogical flow of the lessons right up until the period immediately before his death.
Wow.
It serves as a powerful testament to how absolutely crucial he believed these fundamental accessible teachings were. For him, the pinnacle of scholarly achievement wasn't writing the longest, most impenetrable book.
It was about translation to the masses.
It was about the rigorous distillation of a lifetime of complex learning into something a layperson could easily carry in their heart and apply in their daily life.
I see the appeal of that narrative. I really do. A brilliant scholar refining a tiny handbook until his final days to help the common person. But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because this raises a critical question about the text's mission. The manual is meant to cover three massive foundational pillars of the Islamic faith. It covers creed, which the text calls aqidah. It covers the mechanics of worship known as ibadah. And it covers manners, morality, and ethics known as akhlaq.
That is a huge amount of ground to cover.
Huge. And the target audience is right there in the title, the general ummah, meaning the everyday Muslim public. My question is, by stripping down the theology for the general public, isn't there a severe risk of making it too basic?
That's the danger of any summary.
Right. I mean, doesn't a deeply complex religion lose its necessary intellectual rigor, its necessary nuance when you just boil it all down into a pocket-sized manual?
That is a very fair critique, and it is a tension that exists in almost every system of knowledge translation. However, looking at the commentary by al-Badr, the structural logic here seems to be about establishing a non-negotiable baseline, not about eliminating higher learning.
So it's the floor, not the ceiling.
Precisely. The text isn't arguing that nuance shouldn't exist. It is arguing that you cannot appreciate the nuance of the roof if the foundation of the house is crumbling.
That makes a lot of sense.
Al-Badr specifically structured his explanation of the book by dividing it into easily digestible, highly modular sections. Why? Because the explicit stated goal was for this book to be read aloud to congregations in mosques.
To be spoken directly to the people.
What is fascinating here is the social utility of this text. It represents a deliberate structural act of democratizing knowledge.
Taking it out of the academic tower.
It is a concerted effort to ensure that the foundational truths, the absolute core tenets of a faith, aren't locked away. They shouldn't only be accessible to those who can read classical Arabic syntax.
Right.
They are meant to be accessible, understandable, and immediately actionable for everyone, regardless of their literacy level, their socioeconomic status, or their educational background.
So the text views basic theological literacy as a universal right within the community.
Not a privilege for the elite. Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it as foundational literacy.
Yeah.
And what I found really striking about this manual is that it doesn't just present the information and say, all right, here are the facts, good luck figuring out how to absorb them.
No, it provides a methodology.
It actually outlines a very specific, incredibly rigorous, four-step pedagogical method for the public to learn the chapters of the Quran. It builds a step-by-step cognitive ladder.
And those steps are very deliberate.
Step 1, according to the text, is correct pronunciation. The Arabic terms often refer to this as tajweed. You have to ensure the words are spoken accurately down to the exact phonetic articulation of the syllable.
The physical mechanics of speech.
Right. Step 2 is perfect memorization. You have to take that phonetically perfect text and commit it entirely to memory.
Getting it locked in.
Then step 3 is fluidity. This means being able to recall and recite it steadily without hesitation, without stammering or stumbling over the words.
And in the final stage.
Finally, the pinnacle step 4 is tafsir, which translates to the deep understanding, the comprehensive exegesis, and the realization of the actual meanings of the words you have been reciting.
It is a brilliantly structured cognitive progression. If you analyze it from a modern educational psychology perspective, it makes perfect sense.
Because of cognitive load.
Exactly. You cannot reach the ultimate goal, which is deep, transformative spiritual comprehension, if you are still struggling with the basic mechanics of generating the words.
You're just too distracted by the process.
The cognitive load required to try and remember how to pronounce a harsh Arabic consonant, or trying to remember which verse comes next, actively prevents the brain from reflecting on what the word actually signifies.
You can't multitask profound spiritual reflection and basic memorization.
The pedagogy here is about freeing up cognitive bandwidth so that true reflection can eventually take place.
I was thinking about this, and it immediately made me think of learning to play a complex musical instrument like the piano.
Well, that's a good analogy.
If you want to play a deeply emotional, complex piece of music, let's say a Chopin nocturne, you absolutely do not start your very first lesson by trying to inject sorrow and emotional depth into the keys.
You'd just be mashing buttons.
You can't. First, you just learn where the notes are on the board. You correct your posture, you correct your finger placement. In the framework of our text, that is your correct pronunciation.
Your tajweed?
Then you memorize the sheet music so you aren't constantly staring at a page and losing your place. That corresponds to perfect memorization.
Right, exactly.
After that, you practice those scales and that specific piece hundreds, maybe thousands of times until you can play it without stumbling your hands moving entirely on muscle memory. That is the text's concept of fluidity.
It becomes automatic.
Only then, once the physical mechanics are entirely effortless, can you actually close your eyes, feel the weight of the music, and understand the emotional theory behind the composition. That is your tafsir.
You simply cannot feel the transcendent beauty of the music
Uh,
if your brain is panicking about where the C sharp is located.
exactly.
I think we need to build on that piano analogy because it perfectly illustrates the text's pedagogical intent. When a pianist achieves that muscle memory, their hands know the path so well that their conscious mind is entirely liberated to focus on interpretation and feeling.
And that's what the text wants for the believer.
According to the source material, this four-stage progression is exactly how the everyday believer is meant to approach the foundational text of their faith. It is about developing a form of spiritual muscle memory.
So when they pray, they aren't thinking about the words.
When the believer stands in prayer, if they have achieved fluidity, they aren't anxious about forgetting the words. Their conscious mind is liberated to engage directly with the divine meaning.
It shifts from a passive habit to an active engagement.
This pedagogical structure actively shifts the act of recitation from being a passive rote habit into an active, deeply layered journey of intellectual and spiritual mastery. It respects the learning process of the human mind.
Which perfectly transitions us into looking at what exactly the text is asking the general Ummah to apply this four-step method to the curriculum itself.
The actual content.
The text explicitly focuses its very first lesson on a chapter called Surah al-Fatiha, which translates to the opening chapter of the Quran.
The gateway.
And alongside al-Fatiha, it mandates the study of a specific selection of what are called the short surahs. To be precise, it focuses on the chapters running from one called Az-Zalzala through to the final chapter of the Quran called An-Nas.
If we pause and analyze why these specific shorter chapters are chosen for the primary foundational curriculum, it reveals a deeply pragmatic, highly practical approach to religious education.
Why not start with the longest chapters?
Because these short chapters, alongside Al-Fatiha, are the ones most frequently recited by the general public in their 5 daily prayers.
It's about everyday utility.
The author Ibn Baz is not assigning abstract theoretical reading material. He is ruthlessly targeting the very words the believer uses every single day, multiple times a day.
Maximizing the return on investment.
The pedagogical goal here is to maximize the spiritual return on investment for the rituals that are already taking place in the believer's life.
Make the thing they already do mean more.
If you can make the 5 daily prayers deeply meaningful by ensuring the practitioner actually understands the short chapters they are reciting, you have fundamentally transformed their daily lived experience of the religion.
And the text doesn't just say, these are important because I say so. It includes some incredible historical anecdotes to illustrate exactly why these specific chapters hold sufficient weight.
The historical context is so vital here.
There is a deeply fascinating story recounted in the commentary from the time of Uthman, who was one of the early caliphs and a close companion of the Prophet Muhammad.
A major historical figure.
According to the story, a man stood up in the congregation to lead or perform a prayer, but he recited only Surah Fatiha. He didn't add any other chapters, which is often a customary practice.
It was seen as the bare minimum.
When this was later brought up to Uthman, perhaps with the expectation that Uthman would correct the man or tell him his prayer was incomplete, Uthman's response was incredibly brief and profound.
What did he say?
He simply replied, "You did well." He didn't scold him for not reciting more volume. He validated the action, confirming that this one central chapter holds supreme independent sufficiency.
That anecdote is structurally vital to the text's argument because it establishes the absolute undeniable centrality of Al-Fatiha within the theological framework.
It is enough on its own.
It acts as the core of the core. If you have nothing else, the text argues Al-Fatiha is enough to sustain the connection. But the explainer al-Badr provides another historical anecdote that is equally telling regarding the curriculum of the short surahs.
And it speaks volumes about the psychological understanding of the early community.
It really does.
Yes, I really want to dig into this second anecdote because I found it incredibly moving. The text recounts a story about an old man who came to approach the Prophet Muhammad.
Setting the scene of an oral culture is important here.
Now imagine the scene. You have an elder of the community, and in a deeply oral culture where memorization is highly prized and a sign of status, this man makes himself completely vulnerable.
That takes a lot of courage.
He is fiercely honest. He tells the prophet that he has grown old, that his mind simply isn't what it used to be, and that his memory has grown weak.
He was confessing his limitations.
He was essentially saying, I cannot memorize the long, complex chapters of the Revelation anymore. I need something manageable, something that my aging mind can actually hold on to.
And the response is what makes this so profound.
What I find striking is the prophet's response. He didn't tell the old man to try harder. He didn't suggest that his faith was lacking because his memory was failing.
He met him where he was.
Instead, he advised the old man to recite a specific short chapter that begins with the words Idha Zuzilat, which is Surah az-Zalzala.
The earthquake.
He prescribed this specific short chapter because despite being very brief in word count, the text views it as incredibly densely comprehensive in its overarching message about ultimate accountability.
What's fascinating here is the profound empathy embedded deep within the text's pedagogical worldview. When you analyze this anecdote, you see how the faith structure as presented by the author actively and compassionately accommodates human limitations.
It doesn't demand the impossible.
It acknowledges the undeniable realities of the human condition, like the cognitive decline associated with aging, or simply the fact that some people naturally have poor memories or demanding lives that prevent extensive study.
It lowers the barrier to entry without lowering the value.
Yet, it accommodates these limitations while still ensuring that the individual is provided with immense undiluted spiritual depth. It proves that within the framework of this tradition, spiritual weight and religious validity are not measured purely by the sheer volume of text a person can memorize.
Quality over quantity.
They are measured by the comprehensive nature of the text being recited and the sincere cognitive engagement of the believer who is reciting it. It is a brilliant mechanism for ensuring no one is aged out or stressed out of the spiritual community.
So we know the curriculum, we know the pedagogical steps to learn it, but how does a believer actually cross the threshold and begin to engage with this sacred text?
The preparation for recitation.
The source material breaks down the very first mandatory steps a person must take before their lips even form the first word of the Quranic recitation. It starts with a concept called the isti'adah.
Seeking refuge.
For our listener, this is the mandated act of seeking refuge. Specifically, it is the phrase where the reciter verbally seeks refuge in Allah from Satan the outcast before beginning any recitation.
It is a non-negotiable starting point.
But I want to push on this. In a modern context, someone might read that and think of it as just a superstitious warding off of an evil spirit. How does the commentary actually explain the mechanics of this act?
The explainer al-Badr breaks down the reasoning for this mandate in a way that functions as a highly sophisticated critical psychological grounding.
A psychological framing.
The text posits a specific worldview, that engaging with the divine word is a monumental, cosmically significant act. Therefore, seeking protection from the whispers, the distractions, the anxieties, and the doubts planted by Satan is a necessary practical prerequisite.
It's functional.
If we look at this through a psychological lens, it acts as a mental airlock.
A mental airlock. I like that. But how hard is it for a modern person whose phone is buzzing with emails, who is stressed about their mortgage, to actually achieve that?
That is exactly why the text frames it as an active verbal seeking of refuge, rather than just a passive suggestion to calm down.
You have to say it out loud.
It requires the reciter to actively acknowledge the presence of distraction and deliberately ask for a barrier against it. You are stepping out of the profane, noisy, highly distracted, notification-driven world.
You are building a wall.
Before you can truly enter the sacred silent space of the text, you must consciously, verbally declare your intention to shed those worldly distractions and negative internal dialogues.
A hard reset for the brain.
It is a deliberate, mandated shift in psychological focus. You cannot read the divine word while your mind is simultaneously lingering on workplace polities. The isti'adah is the mechanism designed to sever that lingering connection.
Okay, that makes sense. It is the palate cleanser for the mind. And once that mental airlock is engaged, the text moves to the phrase that starts it all.
The basmala.
The phrase that precedes almost every chapter. The full phrase is Bismillahir-Rahman-ir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
A phrase repeated millions of times a day globally.
I have to say, our source text really takes its time dissecting these specific words. It doesn't just gloss over them as a standard intro.
It treats every syllable as foundational.
It explains that the very first word, Bismillah, fundamentally means seeking help and seeking blessing through the name of Allah. It is framed as an absolute declaration of reliance.
You are admitting you can't do it alone.
You aren't just reading a book. You are stating that you cannot even begin begin to read or understand it without divine assistance.
And the text is highly meticulously specific about the definitions and the theological weight of the names used in this opening phrase.
It breaks down the names very deliberately.
The name Allah, according to the deep dive provided by the commentary, denotes absolute unrivaled divinity. It signifies that the Creator possesses the absolute inherent right to be worshipped.
And there's a reciprocal relationship there.
And reciprocally, because of that absolute right, it demands complete submission, total humility, and devoted worship from the human servant. It instantly establishes the ultimate cosmic hierarchy before the actual text even begins.
Setting the stage.
The reciter is reminded of exactly who is speaking and who is listening.
Right. It establishes that sense of absolute, almost terrifying awe, the sheer scale of the divine. But then it immediately follows that overwhelming concept with two specific names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim.
The twin concepts of mercy.
The text takes care to note that while these are two distinct names with nuanced linguistic differences in Arabic, they're both fundamentally derived from the core concept of mercy. They denote a vast, all-encompassing, profound grace.
It's an immediate pivot in tone.
So look at the emotional whiplash, or rather the emotional balance here. You have the ultimate, awe-inspiring, absolute divinity immediately paired with boundless, intimate, accessible mercy.
This duality is utterly essential for setting the correct psychological state of the reciter. The text is engineering a very specific emotional environment.
Why does it need both?
If the reciter only felt absolute authority and awe, they might be paralyzed by fear, unable to connect out of a sense of profound unworthiness.
They'd just be crushed by the weight of it.
Conversely, if they only focused on mercy without acknowledging the absolute authority, they might become complacent, treating the divine relationship lightly or without the necessary reverence.
It would become too casual.
By pairing them perfectly in the basmala, the believer is entering the text, balancing a profound reverence for absolute authority with the comforting, secure embrace of absolute grace. It is the theological sweet spot for optimal spiritual engagement.
And that perfect, carefully engineered balance leads us right into the masterpiece itself, Surah Al-Fatiha.
The opening.
The source material refers to this specific chapter with immense reverence, taking the time to break down the anatomy of its phrases to explain why it is the core of the core.
It parses every line.
The opening declaration of the chapter is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, which roughly translates to absolute perfect praise belongs to Allah, the Lord of all worlds and all creations.
It's a massive, sweeping statement.
Now, it's easy to just read that as a standard poetic opening, but the text pulls a lot of philosophical weight out of it.
The analytical focus of the text on that specific phrasing highlights a crucial foundational theological pillar.
Which is?
By explicitly stating that the Creator is the Lord of all worlds, all realms, and all creations, seen and unseen, the reciter is actively, consciously acknowledging that there is no partner in creation.
Total unifying monotheism.
It is a daily repeated affirmation of absolute, uncompromising monotheism. It strips away any ancient or modern concept of a divided universe, a pantheon of competing divine forces or domains of reality outside of divine control. It unifies all of existence under a single supreme authority.
Then the surah moves from the grand cosmic scale to something deeply personal and inevitable. The phrase Maliki Yawmiddin, master of the day of judgment or the day of recompense.
The ultimate accountability.
The commentary provides a very specific psychological intention for the inclusion of this phrase right at the beginning of the prayer.
The text explains that declaring God as the master of the day of judgment is deliberately engineered to instill a profound sense of awe, fear, and ultimate accountability in the reciter.
It snaps you to attention.
Think about the mechanics of this. As the believer stands in their daily prayer, perhaps in the middle of a busy workday, reciting this phrase forces them to momentarily halt their current reality.
To look past the immediate moment.
They are forced to mentally project themselves forward to the end of time, to the moment they will stand completely exposed, stripped of all worldly titles and wealth before the divine, to answer for every action of their lives.
It violently bridges the gap between the immediate mundane ritual and the eternal consequences of their moral choices.
It makes the stakes incredibly real.
And then we reach what the text seems to consider the absolute climax of this internal realization. It comes in the very next line, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in, only you we worship and only you we ask for help.
The pivot of the whole chapter.
I want to linger on this because the source material elevates this line above almost all others, calling it the ultimate declaration of sincerity. It isn't framed just as a statement of fact. The text explicitly describes the specific sentence as a powerful spiritual cure.
It is medicinal.
Yes, the text frames it as an antidote to the most collusive, destructive diseases of the human ego. The pedagogical manual identifies 3 specific psychological and spiritual ailments that this one sentence is designed to eradicate if understood and recited correctly.
Let's break those down.
Let's unpack those 3 cures because they are incredibly relevant even outside a strict theological context. According to the source first, this line cures shirk.
Polytheism.
The text defines shirk as polytheism, or the act of associating partners with God, by forcing the tongue to say, only you we worship, with the emphasis on only you actively eliminate any other idols.
And that extends beyond physical idols.
Exactly. We aren't just talking about stone statues here. We are talking about anything a person might elevate to the level of ultimate devotion, wealth, status, or power.
Right, making money your god, essentially.
Second, and I found this fascinating, it cures a concept called riya. The text defines riya as the act of showing off or performing religious or moral duties simply to seek the approval, admiration, or praise of other people.
Performative morality.
It is performative morality.
If we connect this concept of Riya to the bigger picture of our modern lives, it is staggeringly relevant. We live in an era of hyper-curated performative behavior.
Social media is built on this.
We have entirely new structures designed around the concept of doing things to be seen doing them. If a person does a charitable act, but their primary motivation is to post a video of it to receive praise and validation from their digital audience, the text would classify that as a manifestation of Riya.
The action looks good, but the intent is poisoned.
The action might look good externally, but internally, the intention is corrupted by the human ego's desperate craving for an audience. The phrase, only you we worship, forces the reciter to strip away the audience.
It demands that the individual confront their true intentions.
Are they performing the ritual for societal clout to be seen as pious by their community? Or are they doing it solely for the actual unseen spiritual connection? The text argues that true sincerity requires the death of the performative ego.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. It is the ultimate anti-performative statement. And that leads to the third cure, which targets an even deeper layer of the ego.
The arrogance of self-sufficiency.
The text says this phrase cures kibr. Kibr translates to internal arrogance or pride. The text argues that by explicitly stating, and only in note, we ask for help, you are actively admitting your own ultimate helplessness.
You are verbally destroying your own ego's illusion of absolute self-sufficiency.
The illusion of absolute self-reliance is perhaps the most common modern secular myth.
The self-made man.
The idea of the entirely self-made individual who needs no one and nothing. The text views this as a dangerous, arrogant fiction. It argues that human beings are fundamentally fragile and entirely dependent.
On the air, we breathe the ecosystems that sustain us.
And ultimately on the divine will. By mandating the daily repetition of only little, we ask for help, the pedagogy actively forces a daily ego death.
It constantly recalibrates the individual,
reminding them that no matter how much wealth or power they accumulate in the material world, they remain fundamentally dependent on the Creator.
The psychological layering here is incredibly dense.
Yeah.
But if that isn't profound enough, the source material introduces a concept next that I had to read twice to fully grasp.
Yes, this part is wild.
It introduces a specific hadith qudsi. Now, to clarify the terminology for our listener, the text defines a hadith qudsi as a sacred tradition where the Prophet Muhammad is quoting God, speaking directly in the first person.
It's the voice of God.
According to this specific tradition highlighted in our manual, the recitation of Al-Fatiha during the daily prayer is emphatically not a monologue.
It is not a person just reciting words into the void.
The text asserts that the chapter is literally divided into 2 halves, creating a real-time responsive dialogue between God and the servant.
The mechanics of this dialogue, as they are laid out in the text, are breathtaking in their intimacy. The tradition states that when the servant stands in prayer and recites the very first verse, saying, "Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds," God immediately in real time replies, "My servant has praised me."
The immediate acknowledgement.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this perfectly because this feels like a massive conceptual shift. Are you saying the text teaches that this isn't just a metaphor for feeling connected?
No, it's not a metaphor.
It views this as a literal, real-time response happening during every single prayer for every single person reciting it.
Yes, through the lens of this text and its theological framework, it is understood as a literal divine response. It is not a poetic metaphor.
Yeah.
The text insists that the creator of the universe actively listens and responds to the individual servant line by line.
Line by line.
When the servant continues and says, "The most gracious, the most merciful God replies, 'My servant has extolled me.' When the servant says, 'Master of the day of judgment,' God answers, 'My servant has glorified me.'"
Every single line gets a response.
The explainer details that the entire first half of the chapter is this upward offering of pure praise from the fragile human to the absolute divine, and every single offering is individually acknowledged.
And then the text notes a distinct pivot. The second half of the chapter transitions from praise into a direct supplication, a specific request for help from the servant to God.
The dynamic changes.
And according to this tradition, when the servant finishes the chapter by asking for guidance, God concludes the dialogue by stating, "This is for my servant, and my servant shall have what he asked for."
This raises an incredibly important psychological point about the function of ritual. Think about the sheer impact of internalizing this belief.
It completely changes the experience.
The everyday Muslim might perform this specific recitation dozens of times a day across their 5 prayers. In many traditions, highly repetitive rituals risk becoming mindless chores, rote actions performed simply to discharge an obligation.
Just checking a box.
But the pedagogical genius of including this hadith Qudsi in a manual for the general Ummah is that it fundamentally redefines the nature of the ritual itself. Through the lens of the source material, the ritual is transformed into an intimate, closely guarded relationship that is being actively maintained.
It's a living conversation.
The believer is taught that they are never ever speaking into an empty room. Every time they speak, the universe effectively pauses to answer them. The psychological comfort and the sense of profound personal worth derived from this framework cannot be overstated.
It fundamentally changes the posture of the person praying. It changes how you breathe through the words if you believe you are being answered in the silence between the lines.
Exactly.
So that leads us to the natural next question. What exactly is the servant asking for when they make that request in the second half of this cosmic dialogue? The climax of the prayer is the phrase, "Idinas siratal mustaqim," guide us to the straight path.
The ultimate request.
Now, the source material does not leave this open to vague interpretation. It is very clear on defining what this path actually is. The text explicitly defines it as the religion of Islam, describing it as a path of truth that is clear, evident, and wide enough to accommodate the entirety of humanity.
But there are rules to stay on it.
Crucially, the explainer outlines the absolute mandatory prerequisites for remaining on this path. It requires the constant vigilant combination of 2 fundamental elements: knowledge, which the text calls ilm, and action, which is amal.
This pairing, the synthesis of knowledge and action, serves as the central philosophical and ethical axis of the entire text. According to the author, you cannot possess one without the other and claim to remain on the straight path.
They have to exist together.
And the text wastes no time in illustrating the severe danger of separating these 2 elements. It does this by deeply analyzing the final verse of Al-Fatiha, which reads, "Gairul Maghdubi alayhim waladdallin," not the path of those who earned anger, nor of those who went astray.
Our sources break down an incredibly fascinating, deeply psychological and theological distinction between these 2 distinct deviations from the straight path.
Let's look at the first group the text identifies, those who earned anger.
According to the commentary, this archetype represents people who possess the knowledge. They had the ilm. They knew the truth. They understood the theology intellectually. They probably read all the books, but they flat out refused to act upon it.
Their actions did not align with their intellect.
Now, the text uses the historical Jewish community as the theological archetype for this specific deviation.
It is a profound, searing critique of intellectual hypocrisy. The text is arguing that possessing the truth intellectually means absolutely nothing if it does not manifest in your moral behavior.
Being smart doesn't make you good.
Having a library full of books does not make you righteous if you do not act on the knowledge contained within them. Now let's contrast that sharply with the second group the text identifies, those who went astray.
The opposite problem.
The commentary defines this archetype as people who possessed immense, undeniable zeal. They possessed them all. They worshipped fervently. They were deeply dedicated in their actions, but they did so in a state of ignorance.
Passion without direction.
They lacked the foundational knowledge, the ilm, and the true insight required to accurately guide their actions. The text points to the historical Christian community as the archetype for this kind of blind, unguided devotion, arguing that they innovated practices without foundational knowledge.
And I want to pause here and firmly reiterate the framework we established at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Yes, that is important.
We are imparting the structural ideas and the historical archetypes exactly as they exist within the original source text. We are doing this to deeply understand the author's pedagogical worldview and how he categorizes the pitfalls of human behavior.
We are exploring the text's internal logic.
We are unpacking this impartially without taking theological sides or endorsing these historical archetypes as absolute historical facts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what is vital to understand from an analytical standpoint is how the text utilizes these archetypes to instruct its target audience, the general Ummah.
It's a warning to his own people.
The author isn't just giving a history lesson, he's issuing a dire warning. The text is warning the everyday believer about the two fundamental catastrophic ways human ideology fails.
The two cliffs you can fall off.
It fails either through intellect that is entirely devoid of moral action, the hypocrite who knows better but does wrong, or through passionate, zealous action that is entirely devoid of grounding knowledge, the fanatic who acts blindly without understanding the rules of engagement.
To drive this specific point home, the explainer text includes a profound, highly critical historical quote from an early Islamic figure named Sufyan bin Uyayna. And what is brilliant here is that he uses these exact concepts to issue a stark warning internally.
He directs it at his own house.
He directs this critique squarely at the Muslim community itself. The quote says, "Whoever corrupts among our scholars has a resemblance to the Jews, and whoever corrupts among our worshippers has a resemblance to the Christians."
This raises an extraordinarily important psychological point, and it represents a brilliant self-reflective pedagogical move within the text.
Sufyan bin Uyayna is holding up a harsh mirror to his own community.
He is saying, if our scholars, the elite people with all the ilm, the knowledge, the people who should know better become corrupt, seek worldly power, and fail to act righteously, they have fallen directly into the trap of the first archetype.
They know the absolute truth, but they choose to ignore it in practice.
Their knowledge condemns them. Conversely, if our devout worshippers, the everyday people, with all the the passion, the action, become corrupted by innovating new ungrounded practices simply because they feel good, without taking the time to understand the actual theological rules of the faith, they have fallen into the trap of the second archetype.
They are acting blindly driven by emotion rather than divine instruction.
It is a timeless, universally applicable warning. It essentially tells the listener that having a prestigious title like renowned scholar or a reputation as a devout worshiper offers you absolutely no inherent protection from these fundamental human pitfalls.
You cannot rest on your laurels.
You have to constantly, daily balance your learning with your doing. You have to check your intellect against your actions, and you have to check your actions against your intellect.
It is the ultimate demand for holistic spiritual integrity. The text is arguing that knowledge without action is mere arrogance, it is pointless trivia, and action without knowledge is chaos, it is unguided energy.
The straight path, as rigorously defined by this manual, is not a state of being you achieve once and forget about. It requires the grueling, daily conscious work of balancing both elements perfectly.
Okay, take a deep breath because we are going to experience a massive, jarring cosmic shift right now.
Total change in tone.
We are moving from the intimate conversational theology and the internal psychological balancing of Al-Fatiha to the very first of the short surahs analyzed in the curriculum. We are looking at Surah Az-Zalzala, which translates to the earthquake.
And it really is an earthquake for the reader.
The source material sets an incredibly vivid, genuinely terrifying scene here. This chapter shifts the focus entirely. It vividly describes the great apocalyptic signs that will occur just before the Day of Judgment.
The physical destruction of the world.
It describes the physical earth shaking, violently vibrating intensely, and quaking in an unprecedented cosmic upheaval.
The jarring contrast in tone from the previous chapter is entirely intentional. While Al-Fatiha centers on the daily intimate relationship between the servant and the master, providing comfort and connection, Az-Zalzala violently thrusts the believer's imagination forward to the cataclysmic, terrifying end of physical time.
It pulls you out of your comfort zone.
It is pedagogically designed to shock the spiritual system. It ensures that the comforting mercy of the previous chapters doesn't devolve into spiritual complacency.
And the imagery the explainer unpacks is incredibly visceral. The surah states that the earth will bring forth its burdens. Now, what does that actually mean?
The physical ejection of the hidden world.
The commentary details exactly what this signifies according to the source. The earth is going to physically, violently eject everything it has been holding inside its crust since the beginning of time. It will throw out the dead bodies buried within it, resurrecting them for judgment.
The dead rising.
And furthermore, it will forcefully eject all the hidden treasures, the buried gold, the hoarded silver, and the vast wealth hidden beneath the soil.
If we view this symbolically through the lens of the text, it represents the ultimate undeniable leveling of material reality. Think about human history.
All the wars, all the greed.
Think about the things human beings have spent their entire lives fighting over, going to war for, dying for, and burying in vaults to hoard for themselves. In this apocalyptic vision, the earth simply vomits it all back up onto the surface.
And suddenly nobody wants it.
And in that moment, faced with the overwhelming reality of divine judgment, all of that gold and wealth is revealed to be entirely worthless. It is a profound commentary on the ultimate futility of materialism.
The text also highlights the immediate human reaction to this unimaginable event. Imagine the scene the author is painting. You are looking around, seeing the solid ground, tearing open the dead, rising from the soil, unimaginable wealth being thrown uselessly into the streets, and the surah depicts man crying out in absolute uncomprehending shock and terror.
What's wrong with it?
Exactly. What is wrong with it? It captures that raw, primal panic that occurs when the physical world, the very ground you trust to be stable, suddenly breaks all of its own rules.
And here is where the text delivers the absolute climatic reveal of the chapter. The human asks, what is wrong with it? Why is the earth doing this? The text explains that the earth itself is undergoing a fundamental transformation.
It's waking up.
It is no longer just passive dirt rock and tectonic plates. It becomes an active, articulate, conscious witness. The text asserts that the earth will literally verbally testify to every single action that was ever committed by every single human being upon its surface.
So what does this all mean for the person reading this manual? The text explicitly states that the earth does this because Allah commands it to speak and bear witness.
It fundamentally transforms the physical environment.
The ground you walk on every single day goes from a passive, dead stage where life happens into an active recording observer of your morality. The dirt you stand on is watching you. The floorboards of your house are recording your actions.
The psychological impact of this specific teaching on the general Ummah is massive, and it is the culmination of the text's pedagogical goals. It creates a moral paradigm where there is absolutely no such thing as a victimless crime and no such thing as an unseen sin committed in the dark.
You are literally never alone.
You are never truly alone. If a person commits an injustice, a theft, or an act of cruelty in a completely empty room, thinking they have gotten away with it, this text teaches them that the very floorboards of that room are actively recording the event.
Waiting to tell on you.
And one day those floorboards will be given a divine voice to testify against them. It is the ultimate cosmic panopticon.
But it goes both ways, doesn't it? It isn't just about terror and punishment.
Exactly. It operates on the principle of absolute justice. Conversely, every single hidden act of charity, every silent prayer offered in the dead of night, every moment of patience or kindness that no other human being ever saw or praised, all of that is also meticulously recorded by the ground beneath you.
The earth remembers the good, too.
And that ground stands ready to testify passionately in your favor when you need it most. It charges the entire physical world with a profound, inescapable moral weight.
It is genuinely incredible how much profound depth, how much psychological layering and ethical instruction we have uncovered in just a fraction of what is supposed to be a very short manual.
It is a very dense text when you actually unpack it.
We have gone on a massive journey today. We started by looking at a renowned, highly elevated scholar, Ibn Baz, dedicating the final precious years of his life to painstakingly perfecting a simple manual for the everyday person.
We explored the rigorous, logical 4 stages of mastering recitation.
Realizing that perfect pronunciation is just the mechanical doorway to deep, transformative comprehension.
We unpacked the necessary psychological grounding of actively